You hear the name Ted Bundy, and what immediately comes to mind? For a lot of people, it's this image of a charismatic monster, some kind of evil genius. But what if that's the whole point? What if that's exactly what he wanted us to think? Today, we're going to deconstruct that entire myth to get to the real and, honestly, far more important lessons from his case. His legacy is not one of mystery, but of warning. Let's start right there, because this one sentence just cuts through decades of hype and sensationalism. See, the story of Ted Bundy isn't really about some brilliant, unknowable evil. It's a stark, practical lesson in manipulation, in societal blind spots, and the truly terrifying power of a trustworthy face. So you have to ask, how did this myth of the alluring monster even take hold in the first place? To really get the warning his case offers us, we first have to dismantle the very persona that he so carefully and, so successfully built for himself. It's like you have two different people. On one side, there's the myth, the handsome, articulate law student, the so-called charismatic genius. And then you look at the other side, and there's the grim reality, a cold, calculated, and compulsive predator. That gap, that huge chasm between how he seemed and who he was, that was his greatest weapon. He completely shattered the public's idea of what a killer was supposed to look like, and in doing so, he basically made himself invisible. Okay, so how did he actually do it? How did he manage to build this perfect mask? Let's break down the different pieces of this persona he cultivated so meticulously. He was incredibly strategic. He wrapped himself in all these symbols of respectability. He wasn't just some guy, he was a law student. He wasn't just a bystander, he was a political volunteer. He was always articulate, always polite. Every single one of these roles was just another layer on his mask, a mask designed to make him appear not just trustworthy, but even more importantly, completely safe. Now, of course, his background is absolutely no excuse for what he did, but it is often looked at for context. An unstable childhood, one that was really shrouded in family secrets, well, that may have helped create a fractured sense of self and this deep-seated, violent need for control, themes that, tragically, ended up defining his crimes. And this is where things get really, really chilling. He didn't just wear this mask to hide. He actively weaponized it. He turned the very idea of social trust against his victims. It was like a playbook, and it was chillingly effective. First, he'd present that safe persona we talked about. Then he'd create a reason for you to let your guard down. Maybe a broken arm in a cast and he needs help carrying books, or he might even impersonate a police officer. This taps right into our social conditioning, our basic human instinct to help someone who seems respectable and needs it. And once he had that flicker of trust, he could isolate his target. And his method worked over and over again across a huge area. We're talking confirmed crimes in at least 7 states. This massive geographic spread was a huge reason he got away with it for so long. You have to remember, back in the 1970s, police departments in different states just didn't have good ways of connecting the dots. And Bundy knew that. And he exploited that weakness to the absolute fullest. So, Bundy's ability to operate for years wasn't just because he was cunning. It was enabled by some really significant, really critical failures in the system. He wasn't just operating in a vacuum. He was operating in the cracks. Get this. He escaped from custody twice. That fact alone became legendary, and it helped cement this myth of him being some kind of criminal mastermind who was always one step ahead. But was it really about his genius, or was something else going on? Well, the reality is, his escapes and his long reign of terror, they pointed to major failures. That poor communication between state police we mentioned, that created deadly blind spots. The media coverage became totally sensationalized, obsessed with his personality instead of the facts of his crimes. And maybe most disturbingly, he learned how to play the justice system itself. And if you want the ultimate example of this manipulation, just look at his decision to act as his own lawyer. He literally turned his own murder trial into a spectacle, a performance with him as the star. He played the part of this charming, intelligent defendant, and he masterfully diverted everyone's attention, the jury, the public, away from the brutal facts, and most importantly, away from his victims. Okay, so we've torn down the myth, we've looked at his methods, we've seen the systemic failures. What are we left with? What is the true legacy of the Ted Bundy case, and why in the world does it still matter so much today? When you look at a timeline like this, you're not just seeing a series of dates.
What you're really seeing is a clear pattern of escalating violence. It's a terrifying chain reaction that was only made possible by those systemic gaps and societal blind spots we've been talking about. Each event tragically builds on the last.
The Bundy case is pretty much the textbook example of a really dangerous cultural trend called offender spectacle. This is the trap that we all can fall into when we become so fascinated with a killer's supposed charisma or intelligence that we effectively erase the victims from their own stories. Their suffering gets marginalized.
And that is exactly why it's so critical that we actively reframe this narrative, shifting our focus from the killer's mystique to the real human cost. That's not just about honoring the victims. It's about learning from these tragedies so we can get better at recognizing the tactics of manipulation in our own world right now.
Which leaves us with this final, really vital question. Bundy's legacy is a stark warning that the most dangerous threats, they don't always look like monsters. So often they wear a familiar, trustworthy face. The real test for all of us is whether we've learned how to look past the charming performance to recognize the real danger that lies just beneath the surface.